Good morning. Good morning. It's a great honor to be here. I was thinking when I decided to come over here about being introduced to the slow money concept. I was really slow to really pick up on what he was talking about, mostly because I'd had 3 martinis when he started talking about it the first time we had this conversation. He'd forced me to have 3 martinis by having 3 martinis himself, and because I admire Woody's masculinity, I had to have 3 as well. And then he started talking about slow money, and he started talking about slow money in the way Woody has, which is very humble and very measured and very precise, and all of those are qualities I don't particularly respect. So I'm 3 martinis in, I'm trying to follow this, and I'm not getting there at all. But the next night I'm out with a group of farmers, and Woody's giving the same speech in the same measured and precise and careful way that he does. And I'm, again, a couple of drinks in and bored out of my mind. And I'm looking around, though, and I'm seeing all these people, and they're deeply moved, and they're listening with rapt attention. And I do really like rapt attention, so I tuned in at that point, and found that, in fact, what I'd been missing was that the slow money conversation and Woody's relation of that conversation is really a very practical solution to an existential problem. In the next 8.5 minutes, I'm going to do what I can to make you want to die. The people who laughed at that are people who've heard me speak before. They've seen me do it in 30 minutes. They don't know if I can do it in 10, but I'm going to give it my best shot. There's a really fundamental issue confronting us all. We all know about pollution and overpopulation and basically the exhaustion of the planet's resources and the destruction of our habitat. And all of those things are somewhat daunting, but manageable with the science we already know. What's not manageable with the science we already know is the economic problem. A couple of years ago, worldwide productivity went down half of 1 point. Worldwide markets sank 13% over the same time period. Our economies are a motor tuned very much to rapid expansion and growth. And without expansion, which of course is accomplished at the expense of resources, you all know this, without expansion we don't know how to create prosperity. That's a problem we haven't solved yet. So I'm encouraging every smart young person I know to study economics rather than any other discipline, because it really is the most fundamental challenge facing us. The brilliance, the astonishing wisdom within the slow money idea, from my perspective, is that it describes something like the DNA of a brand new economic idea. An economic idea where value is conferred in a brand new way, based on all of the effects of the creation of the product, based on all of the ways of enjoying and savoring that product, based on the knowledge not only of the producers but of the consumers. And this DNA is described pretty fully in the slow money concept. And so after I sobered up and spent some time reading and thinking about what this slow money thing was all about, it dawned on me this is actually a super important thing and a great honor for me to be here and associated with it. The existential problem, though, is a bit more, well, it's more exciting and more vexing than I think we're most of the time letting on. So let's imagine that we miraculously solve the riddle and cure cancer tomorrow. In the next 12 months, we'll have to build the equivalent of an additional New York City metropolitan area because we cured cancer. That's the additional population which will survive the 12 months due to that presumably positive and miraculous accomplishment. If, as some people think, we're going to dramatically extend human lifespans in the next few decades. Well, if tomorrow the average human lifespan went to 120 years, next year we would build 8 New York cities in addition to the expansion that's already occurring. Now that's all the sidewalks and all the buildings and all the sewage treatment, not to mention all the infrastructure to provide food and medicine and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the impact of accomplishing, again, Another miracle, continuing human expansion. We've done a phenomenal job of that. I mean, we're really an amazing creature, faster, stronger, louder than any other living thing that we know of in the universe. We've populated virtually every habitable inch of the planet because we're so successful. And now, for the first time, as far as we know, in the history of the universe, a living thing is up against a limit it understands. We are the only species in the universe, as far as we know, that can conceptualize its own impact on its habitat. You and I have the great good fortune of being here as we begin to grapple with that capability and with the responsibility that goes with it. I raise cattle and sheep and goats on a little place in Kansas. And I got started when I was about 8 years old. I went to work for a neighbor following milk goats around in the desert. And I thought immediately, you know, I wander around the desert. These milk goats are eating mesquite beans and acacia leaves. And I bring them in, and then they're giving this amazing rich milk. And I think it's a miracle. And I also knew that when the little boy goats got up to a certain age, we were responsible for killing them. And I found that the magic, the alchemy in the whole agricultural process was tied up with this idea of mortality. And as I've been reading, you know, these predictions that our lifespans are going to get much longer, and as I think about the population, I myself said, well, okay, let's say we have a practical choice between reproduction and immortality. Which one would I choose? And my conclusion is I would choose mortality. And in that instant, I had a completely new view of my own life. And I was happier in that instant because death was no longer something to be feared, just on a personal level. Suddenly it was my opportunity for heroic death because in some sense, each one of our deaths will be heroic when we leave space and resources for other human beings, other living things. And in that context, it seems to me, a whole new human mythology could grow. Because we have to grow up now. We're truly responsible for the resources we consume. We're truly deeply responsible for our decisions. We're truly responsible for leaving and leaving room and allowing nature to continue to innovate in its brilliant, irreplaceable, unreproducible way. And I love that idea of each and every one of us having the potential to die heroically, intentionally, at some point that, thankfully, most of us will get to choose. I'm going to choose that. And I hope I can convince other people to think of death in sort of the same way. About every fall, about 50 fundamentalist Muslim men come to my farm, and we all go out in a pasture together and we kill 30 or 40 young rams. This is part of their ceremony, their annual feast called Eid al-Adha, which is a reproduction of the Abraham and Isaac story. You may know it. Abraham was asked by God to go kill his son on the altar. He so faithfully gets out there. He's got Isaac on the altar. He's ready to cut his throat. And God says, you know what? Go get that young ram out of that bush and sacrifice it instead. Previously, I always read that as some kind of strange and somewhat perverse depiction of the importance of faith in God. Then it occurred to me that what it really is an illustration of how the death, the bloodletting, the pain, the passing of each of those animals in this very intimate way, in this very intimate setting, is a reminder of what they give for us and what we in turn owe creation, God, the planet. In that light, I really savor that weekend once a year when I sell those rams to this Muslim community. And they bring all these young boys, it's all men because of the way they do things, but they bring all these young boys in, and these are urban graduate students and whatnot. But they teach each of these young kids how to kill a sheep by hand and skin it and section it and take it away. I think there's something really profound in that knowledge, something that sets a higher standard for our recognition of the animal sacrifice and the necessity of our own mortality. With that in mind, I will urge you all to join me in going out and trying to convince the people you know in the world in a joyful and an enthusiastic and a passionate way to be concerned about the planet, to do what they can for future generations. In fact, to grapple with the question of their own mortality. I'll say just very quickly, Mother Earth News has been the fastest growing big magazine in North America 2 out of the last 4 years. And I'm going to quote one new statistic just so you get an idea of who it is we're engaging in this. Mother Earth News readers are 95% more likely than the average American to describe themselves as very liberal, and they are 85% more likely than the average American to describe themselves as very conservative. So I urge you to open your minds and open your hearts, and I thank you for having me here. Thanks so much.